Today we're going to be looking at 5 wide receivers to sell in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Obviously, this is for middle of the road to rebuilding teams, so look at your standings. Look at how many points you're scoring per week. Look at how you feel about your fantasy team, and you may want to look at moving these wide receivers. If you're a win now team, if you're at the top of the standings, you may want to look at the inverse and look at these players as possibly buys. Maybe trying to get them on the cheap. Maybe trying to kick the tires at these players, even though their value might be up due to recent production. That's something you may want to look at. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now, because we're talking about these players every day. We're doing deep dives on these players every day. We're going over the advanced analytics and everything else. Click that button. Stop missing out. The first player we're looking at, Chris Godwin. I talked about him last week, but it was at the end of the video, and it's still holding true. We're age 28. Our contract's getting kind of weird after this year. We're productive, so that means win now teams are going to want him. They're going to want that production. We're looking good with a 30% target share right now. That's the highest of his career. That is very high for any wide receiver. That's an elite total. 168 air yards on the season, just 56 per game. So that is a red flag. 56 air yards per game and a 6.6 ADOT, air yards per target. So he's not getting very many deep passes. He is getting a lot of volume with 8 targets per game, but that is a massive red flag for the long term for the season. Also, we're questionable this week, so you may not be able to get a deal done, but this is something you need to pay attention to. If you're middle of the standings, you're back of the pack, he's getting a lot of workload. He's getting a lot of targets. He's being productive. That's great. It ain't going to help you if you're not in the hunt to win your league. If you're not in that hunt, it's time to go. It's time to go. You got to look at this very critically right now. Can you get a good pick out of him? Can you get a younger prospect from a win now team out of him? Can you do that? Because the ADOT's not high. We're getting a lot of volume. Our contract is getting a little suspect here from what we're seeing from SpotTrack.com here. 56 air yards per game. We get a lot of work out of the slot. About 70 to 75% of his snaps are out of the slot. So we're getting an opportunity there, which leads to good fantasy production out of Chris Godwin. But are you going to expect Chris Godwin to hold up this production 3 years from now? Another thing you want to look at, you're not competitive right now. You're middle of the road. You're in the back end. You got some hopium going on. Well, next year he'll be 29. What if it's 2 years from now and he's 30? Where do you think he's going to be at in trade value? Where do you think he's going to be at in production during those times? It's hard to bet positively on that. And right now he's on the high. Win now teams are going to need this. Maybe you can stack up on Chris Godwin, get some picks out of him. Maybe you can do something to really help your fantasy team out for the long term. But Stefon Diggs, it's hard to really sell him right now in Dynasty Fantasy Football due to the age. But now you got to bump up. We got a 19.92 point game, a 21.9. You're also seeing a 22% target share right now. You got a good quarterback. You're seeing 55 air yards per game. And that's the trend with all the wide receivers we're looking at. They're older. They're not getting deep targets. They're soaking up volume from the short game. That being said, there's a red flag with that. Stefon Diggs is not very liquid on the market. Nobody's really going after 30-year-old wide receivers. However, if you're going to catch a little bit more oomph on the trade, it's going to be right now with a win-now team. And you got to take advantage of those win-now teams, especially right now as they're making their push. They're trying to work their way up the standings. We're 3 games into the season. We're going to be into 4. That's still a lot of weeks into the season to know about your fantasy football team going on a dynasty realm. Because a quarter of the teams are in it to win it. A few more are in the middle of the road. And the back quarter are rebuilding, retooling. And a few of them don't even know it yet. Stefon Diggs here. Age 30. If I'm like 1-2, I'm looking at this hard. I'm looking at this very hard. I already got 2 losses to my name. If my team's not absolutely stacked around him, I got to make a move. I got to make a move. If I don't feel 100% certain, then I got to make a move. And you just got to go off your gut. You got to look at your team. You got to look at those top teams in your league. You got to make a move if you don't feel good about it. You got to look at your roster. And maybe you take a little hit. But right now you got a little umph. That may allow for some liquidity. 30-year-old wide receivers are usually not hot in the market, but he's seen a 22% target share. He's running in on a lot of routes. He's getting a lot of opportunity in this offense. This might be something to look at here. Davante Adams, 31 years old. Same thing. 31-year-old wide receivers are not hot on the market, but he's rocking a 25% target share. 262 air yards on the season, 87 air yards per game. He's looking a little better. He's actually looking better than the other wide receivers when you're looking at true workload metrics. But again, if you're 1 and 2 and you're looking at the standings, you're looking at the other teams in your league, and you're not feeling great about it, it's time to make a move. He can't be rotting on that roster. He just can't be doing it. And now we got some signals here. We got a 10-point game, a 26-point game. We got 8 points against Carolina. It's probably going to be up and down right now with the Raiders. However, when you're looking at everything else, you're looking at the target share, you're looking at what's going on with this team and his work rate, you got something to go off of right now. You also got some years left on this contract, so compared to some of the other wide receivers we're talking about today, you can probably hold a little bit longer and feel okay. If you're middle of the pack and you think you're going to be all right, you might be able to weather a storm and get back up in the standings. However, if you're not, we're going into age 32 next year, and the liquidity's dropping, the value's dropping in your stock for next year for Davante Adams. You better hope you turn things around quickly and you're like top 3 in the standings next year when it comes to win now, or this is really going to shoot you in the foot, because he's still going to get volume in the offense next year. He's still going to score enough fantasy points to stay in line, but that's also going to hurt you too, because that's going to keep you in the middle of the ranks in the standings, mid-round pick in drafts. That's not going to help you out much. You may want to look while he's kind of on the up, especially after that Baltimore game, looking at this volume, maybe you can capture on some upside here. Allen Lazard, and honestly, I take whatever I get. I take whatever I get off that win now team, because he's getting a lot of volume here. He's pushing a 20% target share, which is very good with Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson there, soaking up targets. There's a lot of targets going to the running back in this offense. Not many air yards per game, 52 air yards per game, 9.8 an okay average depth of target. So the volume's there, but I'll take whatever I can get for Allen Lazard. If I'm middle of the road, I'm a losing team, he's just sitting there. Even if I'm not starting him, I'll take whatever I can get. I'll take whatever pick. He's gone, 28 years old, and I'm not expecting him to be a cornerstone of my team. And if I can get something nice my way, cool. If I can get something little, cool. He's gone, especially if I'm in the middle of the pack. Really not doing enough value-wise for Dynasty to really get me anything in the future. The up is up. He's been scoring. He's been looking good. He's been getting opportunity. He's getting 5 targets per game. A win-now team might want that on the back end of their roster. Deontae Johnson. His contract's kind of funny with the Panthers, so things has to go right this season. And I look for him to easily have a 25% target share ending the season. And that's going to allow his stock to be okay to a little bit higher. And I look for him to have some good games this year. And I look for him to be productive. And I look for the work rate to be good. And if I'm a win now team and I'm looking at him at a wide receiver, I'm trying to get him on the low. So a couple more good games. Him looking good with Dalton. He's averaging 8 targets per game. That's due to him being buoyed with 14 targets last week. But prior to that, even with Bryce Young, we got a 6 and 6 back there. That being said, that's looking very solid. His ADOT's at 8.7. I don't like that too much. But again, that's probably going to increase with Dalton. Things are going to change. But we're running a lot of routes. We're running 30 routes per game. We're getting a lot of work. Again, his contract's weird. His age is a little bit up there. And if you're middle of the road and you're back in the stands, like I've been saying this with every player, you really got to start thinking. And if I'm a win now team, you may want to start buying now before things get a little bit dicey. Or if he has a low week, you may want to get in there because he has an elite target share. So I'm really talking both sides of my mouth here. Well, we're looking at both sides of the standings. If you're looking for a wide receiver to help you on the win now, like you want to throw a second, maybe a prospect, you got a 28.3% target share. I do not want to throw a second, but if I'm a win now team, that's a late second. That's an early third, somewhere around that range. I had a 28% target share on a team that I'm expecting to be one of the tops in the league, top 2, top 3, and I'm trying to get over the hump. I look for him to be productive off and on throughout the season due to this quarterback play, but I look for him to get a 25+% target share, and getting a wide receiver with a 25+% target share is usually not cheap. You might be able to catch him cheap if he has a low point, and we got some weird game scripts. Chicago, Cincy. You could throw in Cincy. We saw that with Washington. Don't know if we'll see that again because we've also seen some slow game scripts with him. But Deontae Johnson, he's a sell for me, and he's also a buy for me. I'm talking about both sides of my mouth because that's how the game's played. That's how we're looking at it. But he's in a weird spot right now. But the production work rate's there for if you're a win now team. And the production might be there if you're a sell now team and you're middle of the pack, or if you're a losing franchise and you're just trying to rebuild and retool. This is the time to unload. If you're surprised and you're 0-3, 1-2, and you thought you were going to be a good team, you had them there, and you're like, man, I don't know what to do. You got to look at your rosters. You got to see what's happening because he's a guy that you could easily flip. So we're looking at these players. We're looking at the older players, all wide receivers drafted before 2020, all wide receivers with some production, all wide receivers with good target share. They should all be looking good to win now teams. They should also be hard starts or hard plays for middle of the road to losing teams right now. And they should be players that you should be looking at on the market. If you're a win now team, you're trying to catch some of these guys on the low because they have not been productive enough to really jump in value. And with that age, it's hard for them to get overvalued, which could happen. But again, liquidity on middling teams and losing teams, it could be there. It could fluctuate. Also, if I'm a middling team, I got to figure out my team soon because I do not want to accidentally win some games and then not make the playoffs and then be middle of the road in draft picks. And me sitting with a wide receiver who's going to be 29, 30 years old that I can't get anything for. So you got to figure out your team now. You got to figure out your league now. You got to figure out the top of the standings. I know it's early. It feels early. But things are going to start rolling this week and next week for your Dynasty League. You got to start thinking ahead. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. One thing for watching. Catch you on the next video.